Good evening to everybody who is joining us on the iMedics YouTube channel as well. And obviously, hi and hello to everybody. So lots of people sending out messages at the moment, 50, 51, 53 messages. I don't think we'll get through all of them, but so just looking to see where everybody's kind of joining us from. So we've got, let's see. Okay, so I'm going to try and keep up with this because it's going to be quite fast paced. So let's see whereabouts we are in this list. Okie dokie. So I can see Liverpool on there, which is my favourite football team. So welcome. We'll start from there. So Majid from Liverpool, welcome Majid. We've got Ashwarya from Manchester. We've got a couple more people from Liverpool. We've got Zainab. We've got Majid's taking a gap year. Emily's from Leicestershire. Hi Emily. We've got Sonny from Suffolk. We've got Zenab is a year 13. Eleanor's from Liverpool as well. Quite a few Liverpool people today. Lola from London. We've got Dayeb from Birmingham, who's in year 11. We've got Nafisa from Manchester. Jan Shuya, UK in year 10. So good, nice and early, thinking about medicine, great to see. Roslyn and Jen Nusia are from London. We've got Angela from Manchester. Alicia from Wirral. Why does Wirral ring a bell? It's near Liverpool, isn't it? I can't remember why that rings a bell. Somebody might have mentioned that recently. Mohammed from Manchester, Eden from London, Nazira, Sandra, both from London, Hifsa from Manchester. We've got Emily from Liverpool, Samiha from Leicester, Abigail from Kent, who's currently in year 13, Amelia from Staffordshire, Alanai from London. We've got Mia from Guildford, Celine is in Essex, year 13. Isabel from Wirral, Emily, we've got Sonia from Wrexham, we've got Nafisa, who's an A-level student, we've got Zoe, who's from, I think Zoe is one of our ambassadors, that name rings a bell, but year 13 from Oxford. Evie, I think Evie is also one of the current ambassadors from the previous webinar, so welcome to Zoe and Evie. Surrey, year 12, Susan from London, Nawachi from Hertfordshire. We've got Mia, who's a year 13, Sonia from London. We've got Praveen from Colchester. Oh, here we go. We've got Tallulah from, who's a year 12 from Coventry. This is where iMedics is based, so welcome to our fellow Coventry individual. Being myself and Mo, both born and bred in Coventry. Myra from Manchester, we've got Isa from Nottingham, so it's got a good spread. So I can see that there's another 32 messages, so we probably won't get through them. So Mo, how are things on your end? Are you okay with the live stream? Is everything gone okay?
So we're on YouTube now, we're recording. A couple of housekeeping rules. So if you've got a question, please type into the Q&A icon. If you've got a general comment to make, into the chat box. And then if you want to, specifically if you want your mic activated, which you might have time for, raise your hand and we will try and get your mic activated if time permits. So UCAS, whenever you're ready, then over to you.
Excellent, perfect. Thank you very much, Mo. So what I'm going to do, I just want you to, I was going to say, so you stopped your share screen. I'm going to just get my PowerPoint stuff ready for you guys.
Yes, we will be recording, so you can get access to this later on if needed. It'll be available on YouTube later on.
Perfect. So I'm just going to get rid of all of this. So welcome to obviously all of you guys who've joined us on Zoom. So there's at least 230 plus people at the moment, and I know that some of you are joining us live on YouTube. As Dr. Mo said, there is the Q&A thing. If you do have any questions, probably save them for a little bit later so that we can keep the flow of it going. You can also use the chat box if you wish to. And obviously today it's the How to Get into Medical School free series of webinars that we do here at iMedics. We'll talk through a bit about our own journeys, but also go into the personal statement, which is the main reason I'm sure many of you have joined us tonight as you prepare for your medical school application. So people always talk about hindsight. They say hindsight's a wonderful thing. In other words, if you knew what I know now, I would have done things differently. So that's an important concept in medicine, reflection. So people always ask us, as doctors, how do you kind of, how do you deal with the job? Because it's quite stressful. You have to learn a lot of information. And actually the key thing is reflection. So you have an experience, you reflect on what was good, what was bad, and then you try and work out what you would do differently to improve your performance. And that's what hindsight essentially is, right? So that's what we all do. So these are some important early quotes just to think about as we start tonight's presentation. The other thing, of course, many of you will recognize Muhammad Ali, one of the most famous sportsmen of our time. And he had an interesting quote, which was, the man who views the world at 50 in the same way he did at 20 has wasted 30 years of his life. Now, again, what that basically is saying is that if you, as a 50-year-old individual, still think like you did when you were 20, you haven't really learned anything in those 30 years, because 30 years is a long time. You would have a lot of personal and professional experience in that time. So the way you look at the world as you get older will change dramatically, and so should your kind of, mindset on how you deal with different tasks. And again, that's another important concept I want you to keep with you as we go through this evening's webinar. So what's the concept of experience? It allows you to reflect, learn, and come back stronger. So that's applicable to anything, whether you're preparing for your GCSEs or your A-levels. Some of you may have setbacks. You learn what was good, what was bad, what could I improve, and how can I come back as a stronger individual so that I'm a better candidate next time round. Remember, medicine is competitive. Failure is not at all uncommon. It's very common for people to actually not get onto medical school or not be successful in exams. But the question I ask you guys tonight is, do you give up at the first hurdle, or do you try again? And the ones who try and try again are the ones who often get there. The ones who give up at their first hurdle probably weren't set and weren't in the mindset, and were probably not cut out to become doctors in the first place. And that's how we differentiate between different candidates early on. Couple of things that I want you to think about tonight before we move on to the personal statements. Is medicine the right career for you? So what are the pros and the cons of it? Well, it is a stressful profession. So you always hear about people talking about stress. The stress in terms of the job itself, and the fact that you will often take home that stress to your families, your husband, wife, mum and dad, kids, whoever it is that you live with. So you've got to be mindful of that. There's long training pathways. So it's not just, I've got to go to med school for 5 years if I'm an undergrad, or 4 years as a postgrad, and that's the end of that. Because that's not the end of that. That's the start of additional examinations that you will have if you want to become a GP or a consultant. And you'll still have other professional exams that you'll have to pass before you become a GP or a consultant. You do deal with lots of different life and death situations. Now, that's not just how it is when you watch, television and you see people with a cardiac arrest. It's not just that. It's actually decisions that you make. Sometimes somebody's unwell, and you have to spot it quite quickly. Sometimes, for example, as a GP, you may have someone who's got features of cancer, and it's a life and death. If you decide, actually, oh no, let's sit on this for another few weeks, come back to me if it's still there, that few weeks that you've delayed has probably allowed that cancer to spread. So the concept of dealing with life and death is not just someone's heart stops, as you see on ER or Casualty and whatever you might be watching on telly. But actually, there's lots of other decisions that we as clinicians make that have an impact on people's lives. Hours can be long as a junior doctor, and I should probably amend that and say senior doctor as well, because junior doctors work long hours. I'm sure you will know about this. But also as GPs and consultants, the hours can also be very long, because you have to make lots of decisions. Your role changes, but you're still making lots of, you're still managing the team below you. And again, that can lead to long hours, more than your average 9 to 5 job. Moving locations. So, sometimes people do really competitive, or they might want to go to London, for example. London's very competitive, so you might not, get London because you didn't score well enough in your interview or your professional exams. And you have to be mindful of that, because location as you get older will be very important, because you may have a partner, you may have kids, and they're all things that you may have a house that you've brought, and they're all things that you have to factor in when you think about where you're going to end up. Difficult conversations. So you have some very, very difficult conversations. So I'm a GP. I'll talk about my background very shortly. And Dr. Mo is also a GP. We have an access to people's lives that's absolutely incredible. Some of the things that people tell us, and that's because they trust us, as clinicians. But sometimes you have difficult conversations. You get to know patients, and actually you have to tell them that the scan result shows cancer. And how are you going to have that conversation and these are skills you learn, by the way. You're not expected to learn this as a GCSE or an A-level student. You will learn these as you go through your training, but how are you going to deal with that? When you've known that patient for quite a while, and then you have to tell them that actually this X-ray shows that there's a suspicious mass. We're going to need to do something about this. So things to think about as you go through your thing. Now, on the other hand, the flip side of the coin is, and I'm still asking you the same question, is medicine the right career for you? Now, I look back and I would say from my side of things, 9 years or 10 years now as a doctor, it is the right decision because it's really, really rewarding. And I don't mean rewarding in the sense that, you get paid really well or whatever it may be, but actually rewarding in the sense that you go home and you feel like you've done something decent today. You've had a good day, you've dealt with different cases, you've managed them in a certain way. You feel like you've done something good, for that patient that you saw today. And you can look through your whole list and be like, yeah, that little kid, I did the right thing there. Referred him to hospital or started antibiotics or whatever it may be. And that leads to the second bullet point, which is you feel very fulfilled. You can go home and sleep at night knowing you've done a decent day's work, and you've actually made an impact on different people's lives. It's very inspiring as well. So working as a doctor, it's a hierarchical system. I'm not going to lie in the sense that you do have GPs and consultants, and then you have registrars, and then you have junior doctors, and then you have med students, and then you have people like you guys who are looking to get into medical school. But the point is, as you go through that journey, you're always looking at the person ahead of you. So some of you are going to be, I've just done a brief shout out. Some of you are year 11, and you're going to look up to the year 12s in your school. Some of you are year 12, you look at the year 13s. And some of you year 13s will know people who are already in med school. And likewise, you're always looking at people and thinking, well, if he or she can do it, then I can do it. And they give you some tips and advice. So you're constantly inspiring people. You get inspired by them, but you don't realize that someone below you is looking at you and thinking, well, actually, if she can do it, she's my good friend and I can do it as well. You have a transferable skill set. So medicine has changed dramatically. So lots of people have left medicine as well. But the key thing is the skills that you learn from this degree, such as how to deal with pressure, communication, leadership, teamwork. These are skills that you can take into any other sector should you decide to leave medicine at any point. Of course, doctors are very well respected, good part of society. You get lots of respect from your family. And that shouldn't be the only reason that you do it, but it just shows you the value that doctors have in society. And of course, you would have seen the COVID-19 pandemic, which is kind of still ongoing, but not as bad as it was. And you could obviously see there just how big a role the NHS, not just doctors, of course, HCAs, nurses, midwives, and so forth. Everybody had a huge role to play in that kind of pandemic, but the respect that the NHS workers got, that was it's a flexible career, so it's not how it used to be. People talk about, oh, am I going to be kind of, doing all this on this long career pathway, this or like assembly line, and just going all the way through with more and more exams? And the answer to that is no, because it's an interesting fact actually. So lots of girls in general tend to do better than boys when it comes to A levels. And so what's happened over the last 5 to 10 years is lots of girls have gone on to medical school and then become successful women, successful, surgeons, GPs, hospital consultants. And actually the pathways are way more flexible now because the work profession has changed. It was a very male dominant profession. We went back 50 years. Now there's a lot more balance in the profession. And actually what you find is you can go part-time, you can have kids, you can move deaneries, if you've had children and you want to kind of move to a different part of the country. So the training pathways have become a lot more flexible than they used to be. There's lots of different specialities. So you might be someone who likes kids, in which case you're going to be a pediatrician. You might love women's health, in which case you'll be a gynecologist. You may love mental health, in which case you're going for psychiatry. You may be like me and Dr. Mo. We loved everything, which is why we ended up as GPs, because we get to see a bit of everything. But you'll always find something within medicine that you can see yourself doing for the next 20 or 30 years. There's a humanitarian aspect, which I'm going to touch on in the coming slides. So this is how we kind of work now. Common practice, and we've got our, we wear our shields. Still wear them now, even though the pandemic is not as bad as it was. The cases have risen again, so we still have to be very careful. But this is how our clinics are now. A lot of it is telemedicine, so we'll do phone triage first, and if we feel that this case needs to be examined, we will bring them in. We can also use video medicine, and again, the consultants are also doing similar stuff in the secondary care clinics in hospital. This is me. This is a humanitarian aspect. So when I qualified as a GP back in 2017, I volunteered as a GP for the refugees in Greece. And this was a really rewarding experience for me. I spent 3 to 4 weeks out there. You learn so much. You learn about the concept of transferable skill sets, and you see how valued the UK doctors are, because the way we're taught here is very different to how other parts of the world doctors are taught. I mean, I met doctors here from Portugal. There was people from America, and different parts of the world, different backgrounds, who came out to volunteer. And you get to meet some incredible people, incredible humanitarians. You learn from them, but you also find that because their healthcare systems are often private, they will often do scans and x-rays when you don't actually need to do it. We in the NHS think very differently. We think of it as, is that scan going to change the management, or is the management going to be physio anyway? In which case you don't need to waste money on doing a scan unnecessarily, but it's not going to change the long-term management. Here's a doctor's chamber in Bangladesh. This is where I was a GP. I volunteered for the Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh. This is the largest refugee camp in the world. And this, again, I went with the US humanitarian aid organization. And again, I met different people from different backgrounds who came out to volunteer as doctors, nurses, and so forth. Really good experience. Lots of incredible pathology that you don't see in the West. But again, another example of the flexibility that you have as a doctor. You can take the skills that you've learned and you can be put anywhere on the planet and you can actually make a difference. My journey, so a little bit different to Dr. Mo's. So I started off, none of my family were doctors, but they did teach me a few things that were very important. The first three were the concept of hard work, and that nothing in life comes easy. So both of my parents worked very hard. They set themselves up, financially. My dad did very well in his business, and that was enough to support me and my brothers. My brother did a PhD and is in the science field as an academic researcher in kind of cardiovascular medicine, and I went into medicine. But that hard work ethic that our parents taught us was priceless, because we were able to utilize that to break through the barriers of GCSE, A-levels, undergraduate and postgraduate exams. Obviously, support and guidance. So again, if you've got a good family network around you, again, I feel very humble that I did have that, but you can utilize that support and network for you, and they can guide you as you go through some of the challenges in your career. Role models. So again, my brother, as I mentioned, was a few years older than me, so I was able to look up to him. And I was thinking, well, if he can be successful, then surely I can do that. Parents were, as I mentioned, inspiring, and also family friends. So my dad used to have a restaurant, and there used to be medical students who used to come in from the University of Warwick. They were like, what are you doing at the moment? Because I used to work there on holidays, and they were like, I said, I'm doing physiotherapy. I said, why don't you do medicine? There's a graduate medicine course. And, they sold me the idea of it. They planted that seed. I went away and did the reading, and that was the end of that. And that kind of pushed me into graduate entry medicine after I completed physio. This is my story, which is a little bit different to Dr. Mo. So Dr. Mo went straight from school into medical school, which suggests that he was a high flyer, did well at his GCSEs and his A-levels. I was an average student, so you can see that my GCSEs were kind of okay, not amazing. And some of you guys, or many of you guys who've joined this webinar tonight, will have actually got better the GCSEs and better A-levels than I did. So I went to the University of Birmingham. I did a physiotherapy degree. And then from there, the medicine route wasn't an option initially because they wanted work experience. So I spent another 12 months doing a master's at the University of Birmingham. This is like a sports physio-based master's. And then I had two routes, either a PhD or graduate entry medicine. But because I was still in the zone of studying and I was still very young, I finished physio at 20. Because my birthday's in August, so I'm always one of the youngest in my year. And then I decided to give graduate entry medicine a go. And I never looked back, and I went straight on to graduate entry medicine, successfully completed my 4 years and did my junior doctor years there. And the concept of the last bit of that here, this bit here, is to jump from here, where I class myself as probably an average student. I was able to sit the final GP Royal College of General Practice exam in London. And my score was 95 out of 117, which means it was one of the best in the country at that time. And that, again, proves that you don't have to come from, your parents don't have to be doctors. You don't have to be a high flyer. You can just put your mind to it, work hard, kick down those barriers, and you also will go on to succeed. It's as simple as that. I mean, if I can do it, you guys can definitely do it. And this was, like I said, my final ever exam when I qualified as a GP back in 2017. Been a doctor for about 10 years, been a GP for about 3.5 years now. More recently, so I was appointed onto the NHS England Clinical Entrepreneur Programme, which again was another example of the boy from Coventry parents are not doctors, but I was able to kick those barriers down and keep on proving myself. If I can do it, then everybody in this webinar, no matter where you come from and what your background is, can also be successful. Then we're going to move on to the crux of the actual, the reason why you've all attended tonight. So the first bit was to give you a background. Second bit was to talk about the business and the personal statement. So this is going to be the first step. Many of you are going to do this in your UCAS application form, for this October. And so you want to know some top tips on how can I actually make a decent personal statement, so that the first thing you want to do, guys, and you should be just jotting this down in your head. It's not something that you need to do tonight. It's just something you need to plant a seed into your head tonight, so you can go away from this webinar and actually work on it in your own time. But you need to start with a personal story. So you want to think about what was it that has genuinely sparked that interest in medicine. It can't be about money. It can't be about, I want to have a doctor in front of my name. I want to look good in a white coat, or whatever it is. It's got to be something which is something about you or your experiences that has led you to medicine. And there has to be something. Now, I know for me, it was just as simple as a conversation. A couple of medical students, and also I did physiotherapy. So my route was I was exposed to doctors all the time, could see what they were doing. I kept thinking, well, I can do that. It's not as hard as people have led me to believe. And I got talking to those doctors, asked them if I can shadow them and so forth. So you need to think about that one moment or few moments. It might be a personal story. It might be someone in your family who's had a medical problem, someone who you've looked after. How did you feel? And then I want you to tell that story to someone else and ask them what they think about it, and jot the key points down on a piece of paper. Because the key thing that a good personal statement does is it shows there's a little bit of a story at the beginning. In other words, this was the experience that I had. And this is what led me to going into medicine, because I believe that doctors have a crucial role to play in this segment. And I'm just going to give you a simple example. So people put lots of different things. In fact, personal statements, when we look at them, are often very similar, the first statement. But here's an example. Don't copy this, come up with your own kind of thing. But people put things like, for me, the human body is like, it's intricate, it's complex, it's precise. The impact of disease from physiology point of view, combined with the social and psychological impact of disease, stimulates me intellectually. So that first bullet point is a candidate who's basically saying, I love how the human body works, so precise. I love the physiology bit, but they're also holistic, because they're looking at the human body, not just from a biology point of view in terms of the physiology, but also from the sociological point of view. Society influences disease, and also the psychological impact, because we know that there's a huge psychological burden when it comes to different disease. The opportunity to become a lifelong learner, combining all of the disciplines of science to a patient care, has inspired me to pursue a career in medicine. So this candidate's basically saying to the medical school admissions team, look, I know that medicine, you never stop learning. You never stop learning. And it gives me an opportunity to get a whole host of different disciplines: biology, chemistry, psychology, sociology, bring it all together and treat patients. And that's what's led me to medicine. Because ultimately, if you just love psychological stuff, you could do a degree in psychology. If you just love the physiology, you may as well do a biomedical science degree. There's lots of ways in which how you structure your first statement could lead to an interviewer easily leading you, saying, well, you told me that you love society and how it impacts disease. We've got a really good sociology course. Why don't you apply for that? This is a good candidate who's actually just put it all together and said, well, medicine is the kind of one degree that brings all of that together. And that's what I want, that's what I want to that's what's made me going to pursue a career in medicine. Lots of people write a story. So they might write a story about someone that they've looked after, a family member who was really unwell, and how they saw doctors using their knowledge from a biology, psychology, and sociology point of view to manage the patient and their family. And that was the moment it clicked that they wanted to go into medicine. And so work on that first opening statement. There's 241 people in this webinar on Zoom. There's probably some more of you on our YouTube channel right now. All of you will have a different story. Some of you may not have the story yet, because you might be in year 10. Some of you may not be sure, but there will be something which has sparked that interest. And if there's not, you've got an opportunity to look for that when you go and do work experience at some point. Leads me on to the second point. So the next stage of your personal statement is often about work experience and clinical placements. Where can you do the work experience? So we'll come to this later on from iMedics and help you here, but people can do work experience in a hospital, shadowing a different clinical team. You can do it in a GP surgery. But actually, what you'll find is hospitals and GP surgeries are really, really hard to get. Really, really hard. Now, the COVID pandemic has made it impossible because you just can't go into the buildings, because they're not going to let someone who doesn't really need to be there when there's a pandemic going on go into the surgery or to the hospital, and that makes perfect sense. But even before the pandemic, it was still hard to get. There were still huge waiting lists. People just couldn't get it. So actually, the easier way around is to go to a care home. So there's hundreds of care homes in every city across the UK. What kind of things are you obviously not going to be doing medicine when you go to a care home, but you are going to have the opportunity to speak to patients. You're going to have the chance to do the caring side of things, whether that's making someone tea, making the bed, having them get dressed. These are all holistic skills that you need to have. You can't think that, oh, I'm too good for that. You're not too good for that at all. Those are the kind of skills that will mold you into a good holistic doctor. And then the other thing you do is the poor personal statements are from people who just describe stuff. So I spent 4 weeks working in a refugee camp in Greece, and I saw patients with, malaria and neurofibromatosis. And that's it. That's a description. There's nothing there to tell the tutor that you've actually learned anything. A proper personal statement will have a reflective piece. It will be like, I went to Greece and I did this, this, and this. What I learned was that. And then you put in, what did you actually learn from that experience? And it could be a number of things, like, you have to work you have to work with a number of different members of the team. You found it interesting to watch how, the doctors interpreted the chest x-rays, how they spoke to the microbiologist to work out what bug was in the sputum of the patient. These are things that, that's more than just a description. You're actually reflecting on certain things that you've observed, certain things that you've learned, and some things like teamwork, communication, leadership. Those are the kind of things that, you saw the doctors demonstrate during, the ward round, or when you sat in with a GP surgery. You found, that it was very challenging that the doctors were using the telephone to try and work out what could be going on with this patient who had shortness of breath. And then you learned that actually you can't manage everything on the phone. You have to bring the patient in. You have to check the oxygen. You have to check the respiratory rate. You have to listen to the chest. That's a simple way of turning a description into an actual reflective experience. And that's what the medical school tutors are looking for. So here we go. Here's another worked example that I just want you to have a look at. So this person is basically saying, look, I organised my own work experience at the university hospital, shadowing the elderly care consultant and his team. And I observed the complex interplay between physical, mental, and social health amongst the patients on the ward. Strong communication, resilience, the ability to make difficult decisions, and holistic management were seen in abundance throughout the week. This made me realise medicine as a holistic career. So this person hasn't really described to me what they've done on that elderly care ward. They've just given me an overview of physical, mental, and social health. So it's a holistic, which is a buzzword that I want you to take away tonight. They've also mentioned a cluster of skills. So they've reflected strong communication, resilience, and the ability to make difficult decisions. So they've basically shown the med school tutor that they've described what briefly happened, and they've described some skills. Going into the further detail, that's going to be for your interview, because you can't spend all of your words here talking about how you observe the consultants dealing with Mrs. Smith, on bed 7, and she had dementia, and she had heart disease, and she had COPD, and this is the things that that stuff you cannot write because you don't have enough words to do that. That stuff will be at your medical school interview when they say, right, let's take a random name. Hi, Dave. You've written here that you organise your own work experience. You mentioned this geriatric ward. What was this situation that you mentioned here where you saw a doctor make a difficult decision? And that's for you then to open up and say, well, actually, I observed the doctor telling, Mrs. Smith about a DNAR form. If your heart stops, how do you feel if we don't attempt to do CPR? We will still try to make sure that we treat any infection, but it just means that if your heart stops, would you be okay if we didn't do CPR? And they sign a form. And that's a difficult decision, and you're reflecting on that. And that's a simple way of what they look for. So a few things that I do want you to look at. So again, a bit of homework. So it's not just you sit there and you take this information in. Just take this task away today. You don't have to do this right now, but list some of the things that you've achieved academically, whether that's GCSEs or A-levels. It might even be something extracurricular. Write a brief summary of any work experience you've done. Remember, that doesn't have to be the GP surgery or hospital. It can also be a care home. And then just write down a few things that you've learned from that experience. And what are the transferable skills that you've learned? So remember, we've touched on transferable skills already, like teamwork, leadership, communication, discipline. What are those ones that you've learned? And that will be a good task for you to do as you start to kind of get the body of your personal statement ready for an October submission. So next topic, or next bit, is the other activities. So obviously medical school is very stressful. And they also are looking for people who are very balanced, not just someone who is very academic, who's going to spend all day in the library, because although that might sound good, it's not actually good for your mental health. Medicine's very stressful, not just at med school, but as a career afterwards. So you have to learn how to kind of balance that stress and manage that stress. And so the trick here is you need to demonstrate certain other things that you do outside of your A-levels and GCSEs. So there might be voluntary work that you're doing. It might be some charity stuff. You might work at a local charity shop, might be helping out a care home. Extracurricular activities, there's lots of these. There's so many of these at your stage of your career. You know, you've got after school clubs, you've got sports clubs, arts clubs, and so forth. You're allowed to describe it, but don't just describe it alone. Remember, everything we do after today, we're going to describe it and then just reflect the description of the event and a few things that I learned from that. And the third step I'm going to do is just some transferable skills. Somebody who does art, you know, will be able to learn some skills that they can transfer when they go and use those skills that they learn from their art club as a doctor. So think about some of the skills. Now, there's so many transferable skills that this list is not exhaustive. It's just an overview of some skills that you can transfer from anything that you do, whether that's art or netball or whatever it may be. Things like communication, critical thinking, so being able to analyze a bit of information, weigh up the pros and cons, and then coming to a sensible conclusion. Creativity, teamwork, leadership, managing your time effectively, solving a problem, demonstrating professionalism, demonstrating empathy, managing stress, perseverance, a few of the bits and pieces in there. But you can always demonstrate these transferable skills based not just on your experiences during work experience, but also your actual extracurricular things that you're doing. These are, you know, I play football twice a week, and this is very important for me because it allows me to switch off from my A-level commitments. It allows me to work on my teamwork and leadership skills, working as part of an 11-a-side or a 5-a-side club, and it allows me to offload stress. And this is something I plan to carry on as I go into medical school. So the tutor's looking at you thinking, okay, this guy or this girl is someone who will be keen to play football when they come to med school. They might be a good asset to the football team. And also they've got some kind of hobby that they're doing in the background that they can then switch off from the stresses of life as a medical student. Here's a simple example I want you to take a look at. So sometimes people say, look, you know, I was volunteering at a local food bank once a month. It allowed me to develop my empathy towards those less fortunate than us. So that's a simple way. It's about, maybe 3 sentences, less than that, just a simple, little bit of an overview. Volunteered at a food bank, and that developed empathy because you've got to see people who are less fortunate than you. What a nice, simple way to not waste any words on your personal statement. Got to know the locals, and I use this opportunity to enhance my communication skills. Again, no words are being wasted. As the food bank got bigger, I began to organise local fundraising events with my mum, which allowed me to demonstrate my team working and leadership skills. A nice, lovely chunk there, straight to the point, no words are wasted, you know, brief description, some good skills learned, and great things that you can talk about. And if you genuinely, by the way, don't make stuff up as well. So some students will make things up because they want it to sound good. You make things up, when you go to interview and they ask you about it, you'll get caught out. A person who's done this genuinely, when they get asked in an interview, okay, so you mentioned in your personal statement about this food bank, tell me more about it. Someone's genuinely done this, they're going to be really passionate. They're going to say, well, yeah, absolutely. You know, on a Sunday in Coventry Town Centre under the bridge, they have a food bank, and all the homeless people from all the different backgrounds go there. And me and my mum used to join lots of the different local charities, and we used to take a big box, and it had like bread, milk, and had like, milk powder and things that people can use for the long run. And what we used to do is we used to do this, and then as that bank got bigger, we organized a fundraising thing, and we did a cake morning, and we did we ran around the local park, and we did its 10K run, and we raised £500. That's passion, because then they're like, well, this guy or this girl actually did this, because you're not going to make stuff like that up. If you've made it up, once they ask you that question, you won't be able to come up with anything after that, because you didn't genuinely do it. So do pick genuine stuff, and then you can demonstrate the passion. I've mentioned hobbies. So we've already touched on the fact that you need to have something that you can do to switch off, because medicine, aside from being a medical student, is stressful, but then we can manage that stress as long as we've got other things that we do outside. So again, the most important thing, whatever you do, don't just describe. Please, please, please reflect on what you learned and how you can demonstrate those skills at med school. Here's another example. So I understand that medicine can be stressful career. To relax, I regularly go with my friends. You'll often find me on the hills of Malvern, where I also enjoy big treks such as Mount Snowdon and Brecon Beacons. And challenging routes have allowed me to develop my organisational teamwork and problem-solving skills. Now, just stopping there, so I like to do trekking. So I've actually written that bit. If you're making that up, I will find out pretty quickly, because I'd say to you, okay, oh, you said you go to Mount Snowdon. That's interesting. What's your favourite trail? And you're going to be like, I don't know. No, because you don't have to say. You will get caught out if you start saying things just for the sake of saying them. Oh, Brecon Beacons, where is that, by the way? And you won't know that it's in South Wales, because you might have just read it online, or someone else told you about it. So you have to think things through, but ultimately think about some of the things that you are doing. And some of you guys are doing some really good stuff. I mean, we've got some of you guys as ambassadors, and you tell us about some of the things that you do in your spare time. And we always intrigued, oh, that's interesting, that this guy or this girl's doing X, Y, and Z, and I've never really thought about that. So have a think, go into but break it down, and obviously, again, reflect on it. My other great passion, so let's move on to the second paragraph here. So, or third bullet point. My other great passion is baking. I've always been keen to try something new, and this allowed me to creative thinking. More recently, I began to practice mindfulness techniques, which have taught me how to manage my thoughts during the stresses of day-to-day life. I plan to continue these activities and utilize these skills during med school and throughout my career. So this candidate is showing the medical school admissions team that, so baking is interesting, because baking is, you're using a creative kind of skill of, putting together different ingredients and actually thinking, well, actually, what if I try putting that here, or putting some cream on top, or what if I put a strawberry on top? You're doing things a little bit differently. And then the mindfulness is just the kind of candidate who's talking a bit about how they switch off from the stresses of day-to-day life. If you can come up with these kind of statements and back them up at interview, they look really, really good on a personal statement. This is just an example. There's hundreds of different styles like this that you can come up with, that I'm sure many of you will do. And if you don't do, you should do, because they're good to have de-stress from the day-to-day stresses of life, not just your academic stuff, but even your personal issues that you may have in your life. The final section of your personal statement, remember, is you go back to the beginning statements. This is your last chance to show the admissions tutor that you are passionate about a career in medicine, because sometimes it's just the way the brain works. If you've got 50 personal statements in front of you, admission tutors can switch off, and that's why they're looking for catchy personal statements, especially the beginning, especially the end, to just for that last chance to make that panel think, yeah, this guy or this girl is perfect for our med school. So use that final section to say, look, all of my experiences to date, have allowed me to, or have confirmed 100% that this is the career for me. I cannot see myself doing anything else. I mean, you don't have to kind of break it too much, but a worked example for you. So if my medicine application was not successful at school, but I took this opportunity to reflect and grow. My medicine application was not successful at school, but I took this opportunity to reflect and grow. So in that first statement, I can already tell that this candidate's got perseverance, and they're determined. That they're someone who won't give up. And I'm thinking, well, actually, this guy with this skill is probably going to be good for medical school because he or she might fail some exams at med school or might fail some of their postgrad exams. But they've already proven that with a knockback and a setback, they can carry on knocking on the door, knock through the door, and still go on to succeed. That's what I'm reading when I'm reading that statement there. And the person saying, my determination did not diminish. I pursued a science-related degree and work experience to allow me to pursue my dream of becoming a doctor. That paragraph there has told me so many different things. I believe my experiences have taught me valuable lessons, which have set the foundations for me to go on and excel in medicine. So it's a nice closing statement. And then obviously, that closing statement can be explored further, because the reason you're doing your personal statement, guys, is because you're trying to get step one out of the way to lead you to step two, which is you sat in that, admissions office in front of an interview panel where you get a chance to shine and prove to them what you're really all about. So a nice closing statement, and that's a nice way this candidate's closed their statements. So top tips to think about. As I said before, the first and last statements, very important. You've got to make sure your personal statement stands out. The key thing is you just got to keep reading it again and again and again. And when you've done that, read it again. And the reason for that is because every time you read it, you'll always find some small mistakes. And so what you'll find is after about 5 or 6 attempts, you'll probably then have the perfect personal statement. And then what you should do is get one of your friends and family to read it. And that's really useful because they can look into it and kind of, critique it, maybe pick out some spelling errors, some punctuation errors. Leave yourself at least 6 to 8 weeks. I mean, some of you in this webinar are from different ages. Some of you are 10, you're 11. Some of you may be doing it this October. Still have enough time. We've got about 4 or 5 weeks roughly. So you should be okay to iron out your personal statement. For the guys who are planning ahead, this is a great opportunity. So if you're in year 11 or you're in year 10, start thinking about these things now. In the background, don't let it compromise your studies. Obviously, carry on studying for your exams, but use it to get used to this, developing a bit of a body to your personal statement so that you're not under pressure when you do come to your UCAS form. We will open up the floor to question and answers. I can see there's quite a few that have popped up. Just before we do that, so a couple of things of interest for you guys that you might want to think about. So we do have a Facebook medical school support group with some tips, advice and support. The link is there. I don't think, Mo, if you can pop that in for us, that would be great. If not, we will pop it into the chat for you very shortly. This is very useful where you can ask the team for tips and you can also support each other. And this group's growing. It's quite slow at the moment, but it is growing. And so hopefully, you guys can use that if you've got any questions as you prepare for your medical school application. We've got a free course, which is called How to Get into Medical School 100 Top Tips. It's free. It's online. You simply sign up, you click the free subscription, you put your email in, and then it appears in your account. It's got me and Dr. Mo just breaking down that kind of how to get into medical school, lots of different tips. So very useful. One of the first things we ever did when we set up iMedics. So it's very useful for you. A couple of other things to think about. So brand new course, which is being launched this week. It's the UKCAT video course, and it's taught by the amazing Professor iMedicus, which is a brand new character, AI-inspired character with a lot of great personality, who teaches you how to actually prepare for the UKCAT video course. And again, Dr. Mo will pop that link in for you if you're preparing for the UKCAT. If not, think about it for next year. It's very useful and it will build up your kind of thought process on how to answer the different segments of the UKCAT. And that's a very new project. Our graphics team, creative team, and our tech team have been working in the background to try and get that up and running. Lots of time, money, and investment in that. So we hope you guys will find that useful. There is a virtual medical school work experience. So when the pandemic started, we realized already that there was a problem before the pandemic, but the pandemic just made that problem worse, which is people can't get work experience. And so we moved it online. And actually it's worked really well. So what we've done is we've got a professional Zoom professional Zoom platform. We pay a lot of money for it, but that opens up the platform to people like yourselves, because you can't get 200 people into a webinar without paying Zoom, unfortunately. Quite expensive, but it's something that's worth doing. And what we do is we get guest speakers in from GP land, from consultants or registrars in the hospital. We've got med students. We've got some live role play. We've got videos with actors, so you can see some real life not so nice consultations, but good for your learning, anatomy dissection videos, that you get a holistic work experience. And actually what we found is, we run it 3 times now, we normally have 100 plus people every time, is that it works really well, because within that one day, you actually get exposed to lots of different things that you can talk about at interviews. So it's really well received, lots of really good Google reviews on the iMedics Google page as well. And the next one is actually next Saturday, I think it's on the 19th of September. So if you are interested, again, Dr. Mo will pop that link in for you. That's the virtual medical school work experience. We've also got a really nice tool on our page. This, again, is free to use. The team have devised this, but if you land on the iMedics page and you go to the medical school or med student bit, and what you'll find is this medical school wizard tool. And what you do is you put the 3 or 4 universities that you're thinking of applying, you pop them into this little box, and you just click the compare button. Actually, it will put them all 4 of them into a nice table, and it will tell you everything you need to know. GCSE requirements, A-level requirements, key contacts, what are the things they're looking for, and it's all kind of summarized nicely for you, so you can help use that medical school wizard tool that our tech team devised, free to use, so that you can just have a bit of an idea as to what kind of what different med schools are like, and help you perhaps inform some of your choices on your UCAS form. Social media, so we're on social media, many of you will know. So if you haven't followed us already, we're on Instagram, inspire_medics, where you get lots of daily medical and general content that we post out regularly. We've got a general Facebook page, the Inspire Medics homepage. We've got the YouTube Inspire Medics channel. Do subscribe and follow that for lots of good learning and medical videos. And of course, this webinar has also been streamed live on there, and you can watch it back. We're on Twitter, inspire_medics. And again, you've got lots of good medical content. And also LinkedIn, if you go on to Inspire Medics Limited, you can come across some of the new projects that the team is doing. And that is it. So we can move on to any questions that anyone may have. Let's see. So I'm just going to close that down. So Mo, I think you've been posting some of the links, and is that correct? Or?
I have, yes. If you want to just have a quick screen of the questions, I'll just do a share screen, because I know you were explaining or describing some of the services that we have or features. So the Med School Wizard tool, you guys can see it here. I've included the link within the Zoom chat. I'll include it again in case you don't have it. So it's the link that on the page I'm just on now, and the link is just about to go in. And basically what you can do with this tool is you can compare med schools, see what grades are required, see the competitiveness of each medical school, the contact details, what GCSE grades you need, what if they require Ucat, if they require Bmat, the fees, and the interview style. Really useful, worth checking out. Number 2 is the virtual work experience. Dr. Sandhu talked about this. So we have a virtual work experience, which is a full day work experience. I've included the link in the chat box. And this is a full day. We'll talk you through the itinerary. So first of all, you get an introduction, then you get a real life medical student who is a guest speaker. You get to observe a seriously unwell patient. You get to hear from a hospital specialist, and then one of you can take a history from a patient. And we have an observation for that as well. We have the day in the life of a GP, and then we move on to ECGs and chest X-rays. So we show you what they mean and how to interpret them. We have a lunch break. Then we show you a patient who's had chest pain. You can do a role play with that patient. We show you how to do phlebotomy, so how to take blood. We do another role play where a patient has a complaint. We also get you to observe an angry patient. And then we have some further follow-on sessions about dealing with stress. We do a case-based discussion, which is what's normally done in medical school. So you get to be a part of that. We'll get some volunteers in. And then we also get a real-life patient to join us to talk about their experience in hospital. And then finally, we have a quiz. We also have an anatomy pro section where a real-life body gets dissected. So this, for those of you who are interested in the virtual work experience, the link is in the Zoom chat. If you're sitting the Ucat exam, don't forget, guys, we've got a free Ucat question bank. So there's almost 2,000 questions in that. It's worth checking it out. Completely free. Share it, use it. And it's got a game mode in it as well, so it's worth having a look at that. So this add to cart and then check out. We've got the Ucat video course. So for those of you who are visual learners, you can actually see something like this.
Hello there, my name is Professor Iman, and I will be your guide through the Ucat online video course. Now, we will go through all 5 main parts of the Ucat in detail, along with all my top tips to help you pass the exam. Now, you don't want to miss out on this opportunity, and you never know, I might even have a few surprises in store for you. So join me, and together we will be unstoppable and defeat the Ucat.
It's worth checking that out, especially if you've got the Ucat exam coming up fairly soon. Last 2 bits, guys. See if I can exit this screen. Personal statement for those of you who are coming very close to your deadline for the UCAS application. We've got a personal statement checker feature, 7 days. We've got different price points, but 7 days the most cost-effective price points. And within 7 days, a doctor would have checked your personal statement, made some suggestions, improvements, and tweaks, and get it sent back to you so that you can obviously maximize your chances of getting into medical school. And then we've got a blog, lots of different articles on UCAS personal statements, how to choose topics relevant for medicine. A lot of questions came through, and I'll try to answer as many as we can. And I'm going to pause it there because I guess Dr. Sandy is going to start answering a few questions, which you may have already done.
Yeah, so just scrolling through because there's quite a few questions that have popped up. So just going to move so I can see where we are. And there we are. Okay, so from the top then, so Rimo's got a question. So I've volunteered at a local hospital once for 1 to 2 months. So how would I include that in my personal statement? I've also received a letter. So that's absolutely fine. So again, you need to go back to the work experience section, describe what happened, reflect on what you learned, and then some of the transferable skills that you did. Anonymous, how did physiotherapy differ from medicine? I think the key thing was you get to make more decisions in the holistic management of a patient in terms of diagnosis, investigations, and management as a doctor in comparison to physio. But otherwise, very similar, lots of anatomy, which gave me a good grounding for medical school. I found anatomy quite easy, and I found medical school a lot easier than perhaps other people did. So physio was a good grounding for medical school. How would you reflect on the responsibilities within school? So it depends on what kind of things you're doing. You could be a head boy or head girl. It might be the fact that you get to do talks, in which case you demonstrate communication, or you hold meetings every month, and you get to kind of work with a team. So you're demonstrating buzzwords like discipline, team working, time management, working on tasks that we set, and making sure those tasks are executed. Would you exclude any extra books or webinars you've attended in place of work experience on your personal statement by using specific examples? You could do, because the pandemic does give you a bit more flexibility. So if you have done things like that, but obviously work experience is better. And again, that's one of the reasons why iMedics has that virtual work experience, the next one being next Saturday. But try to get proper work experience if you can, because there's no real substitute for that. And then, the next best thing is the virtual. And then the next best thing is what you've suggested there, which is reading books and attending webinars. Can foundation students get into med school? What are the top universities? So have a look at the med school web checker on the iMedics page. Yes, foundation students can get into med school. There's no kind of, there's nothing to suggest that you won't get into med school. I'm not sure which ones would, obviously there's not many, there's not as many as there are for other ones, but you can still get onto med, as long as you perform well in your foundation degree. They should give you the appointment onto med school. Someone's asked if we can post the Facebook link. If you've got the social media links, please do post them in. Anonymous question, how do we know which university teaching styles are best suited to us as a person? Very good question. You need to read up on problem-based learning versus lecture-based learning. Have a look at the pros and cons of each. Ultimately, in my honest opinion, medical school is so competitive, you don't really get to pick and choose and say, oh, I'm not going to apply to these 6 universities because they do problem-based learning. You get what you're given because it's so competitive. But have a look, and that's what we've covered that in our virtual work experience next week. We're going to do a role play with med students, or whoever attends actually. So whoever attends there gets to get involved in this live role play to see what you think about problem-based learning. But ultimately, it is different to the teaching styles that you have at A-level. Does applying earlier or later in the application deadline for medicine affect your chance? Not really. You can apply on the 15th of October like everybody. There shouldn't be any differences. The deadline is the 15th of October. It doesn't matter when you do it, as long as it's done before then. How many hobbies or volunteering or work experiences do you need for a personal statement? Or is it more about how you reflect on them? It's more about how you reflect on them. So you can list hundreds of things, but really just pick the 2 or 3 that you've done that you're good at, and then reflect on them, and that will make a good segment in your personal statement. Anonymous, so quite a few anonymous questions, which is why I'm not reading the names. If I've predicted grades A star and AA, and I apply for King's Foundation, which is ABB, will I be a suitable candidate for the foundation program? So if I have predicted grades of A star and AA and I apply, yeah, of course you will, because so based on what you've written there, you will be above what they need. So you'll be a good candidate for that program. How can you use books in your personal statement? Is it too late to read? And now if I'm applying this October, okay, so this person, again, it's an anonymous question. You've applied quite late. You can use books. You can talk about, the most recent book that I read was The Rules of Life by Richard Templer. A few things that I learned from this book are So you're putting them down. These are the things that I learned. Whatever you do, don't make it up, because if you come out with a book that the panel have read, and many of us, me, do lots of reading, for example, you'll get caught out quickly. So you haven't read a book, it's a bit late to do it now. You might want to do something in the next few weeks, because 4 weeks is reasonably enough for you to, but again, you've left it a little bit late, and we do see that in a lot of students. And I suppose there's no quick fix. So the answer to your question is you probably need to make sure that you should have done that earlier. You've left it a bit late, but it's never too late. So if you can read a small book that would help you, by all means do it and learn from it and add that into your personal statement, as you still have some time. Anonymous question, is academia the most important quality to have? That is a very good question, as opposed to communication skills and emotional intelligence. I understand that these are compulsory as a doctor, but will these help me out to get into med school? Yes, they absolutely will. So what you'll find is that for undergraduate and postgraduate medicine, everybody's got good grades, or everybody's got a 2-1. So in theory, academically, you're all very similar. And it's the other skills that you've touched on, emotional intelligence, communication skills. You can demonstrate them. That will make you stand out from the people around you, because some people who are very academic sometimes won't have those skills. So, the way I would look at it is use those skills to your advantage. Ibrahim's got a question. If you do work experience at a care home and experience in dentistry, is that enough? So dentistry work experience won't help you if you're applying for medicine. The care home one will. Now, obviously, if you get into a real pickle, you may just have to say, look, there was a pandemic, couldn't get work experience. And so I attended, I worked in a dentist, but it might not be ideal because people around you will have work experience. And as I said, there's alternatives, like we have the virtual work experience. So somebody else would have attended that, and they're more likely to stand out because they've took the initiative and realized that actually I can't get a place in a GP surgery or in a hospital. I've had virtual medicine work experience with iMedics, and I've learned, they do this, this, and this. I've covered loads of different things. So there is a solution to that. So I think, but the care home thing is not a bad option, because that gives you other skills that are relevant to medicine. Anonymous question, what subject do you recommend for your 5th uni? I think if you're recommending a 5th uni, you could do biomedical science. It's a really good question, this, and you get asked this at interview. Truth is, if you've got a 5th choice, it means that you're probably thinking that you're not going to be successful to medicine, and some tutors will say you probably shouldn't even be applying. So I'd probably say to you, there's loads of things you could do. You could do pharmacy, but biomedical science is probably the best one if you're planning the postgrad route, in the sense that it's only 3 years, and you've got things like the tuition fees, which are significantly more expensive for you than they were for me. If I would go back, I still think physio was a perfect choice, because it was 3 years. And you learn lots of knowledge that you can apply to med school. But biomed science is certainly not a bad option, probably the best option for the 5th choice. Anonymous, okay, I think we've already had that question. Do you have more virtual work? So anonymous question, do you have more virtual work experience? Yes, we do, yeah. So the iMedics work experience runs, it's a few times a year. So the next one is next Saturday. There will be another one. I don't think there's one this year, but Ray will probably correct me. It might be one later in the year, but it's normally a few times a year. What unique things about yourself can you include? Hobbies, groups that you're part of, charity work that you've done, lots of different things. There's lots of things that make you unique. Write a list of what is it about you that you think makes you unique. And that could be anything. It might be that you draw great pictures, or, you're the captain of the local netball team, or, you learn how to code, anything. It could be absolutely anything. There's so many things that make you unique. How can I reflect on the books and articles I've read? Quite simple. What did you learn? And then what is it from that you would use to take into medical school? So it might be that, could be anything. You might have read a paper on how drinking 2 liters of water a day improves your energy levels. It's a great paper that I read, and now I know, and I've implemented that into my life. I now make sure that I drink 2 liters of water. I bought one of those special water bottles, and I regularly sip on it throughout the day. And I know that I can take that with me to maintain my fluid levels when I join med school, so that I'm less tired and I can deal with the demands of a degree. That's a simple way, but there's hundreds of examples. When are you supposed to sit the UKCAT and Bmat exams? So they are officially on the websites. There's always a cut-off time period. And if you can signpost the guys to those timelines, and they will let you know when they are. There are certain times in the year that you can sit UKCAT and Bmat. So a question from S. Goralawala. When you say foundation years, are more students with lower grades or for students from underprivileged backgrounds and areas? Good question. It normally is for those with the lower grades, but again, there is some leeway for people from less privileged backgrounds as well. So you have to contact the individual foundation program because they'll all have different entrance criteria. Do you have the... Okay, so those questions been answered. Anush Mohammed's question, does the panel hold interviews before and after the person gets accepted into uni? They will only hold the interviews after your personal statement. So personal statement first, does it meet the criteria? Yes, offer for interview, and then obviously offer for medicine if you're successful. Which books do you recommend reading from personal statements? I mean, there's no specific books that you need for a personal statement and interview. You just need to practice. I can't think of at the top of my head. I mean, there's no major book. There's nothing specific. I think it's just practice, practice, practice. Have a look at our video course. It's free. It's got lots of practice, common type of questions that people get asked. Okay, so Mo's typing a question that someone's got about narcolepsy. So Zara Akhtar, what books do you recommend to read? Okay, so to get an insight into medicine, it's a difficult one. I don't know if you've got any ideas for that, Mo. I mean, I think, guys, the books are books. You need to get experience. So if you're talking about books, you're missing the point. You need to get virtual work experience or real life work experience. And remember, it can be in a care home. Books are just descriptive. They're just describing something. TV shows are showing you something. Try and get proper work experience, whether that's in a GP surgery or a hospital or a care home. Can't get that. Look at the alternatives. There's virtual work experience. We have one. There are probably other ones out there that you can do. Try and use that because nothing beats that experience. Anonymous question, how do universities know if you're from a disadvantaged background? I've got no idea. So they may ask you for proof of, for example, benefits. These are kind of things you have to speak to the university directly. But they may ask, do your parents receive benefits? Can you show us a letter from the city council showing that your mum and dad are on benefits? That's a way of showing that you're from a lower, lower financial background. What happens after you've done med school? You become a junior doctor. That's a question from Yashvi. That question again, if you're asking that, you need to be thinking about what happens after med school. You need to look into that. So you become a junior doctor, and then after you kind of go ahead and obviously apply for different speciality posts. Bad Science was a book which has been recommended by someone down below. Okay, so again, same question from Anonymous. If you get rejection on all offers, it's probably better to just sit back, reflect, see what went wrong, make a decision on to whether you want to go down a postgrad route or apply again next year. Given that the tuition fees are so much more expensive, that decision is a little bit easier, which is, i.e., take a year out, get some experience and apply again next year. Do universities care if parents have? Not really, no. I mean, it's not really relevant if your parents have a degree. Is working in pharmacy classes med-related experience? You can use it to your advantage. You can say, look, I worked in a pharmacy and I used to look at how the GPs used to prescribe, and I was involved. What you could do is, if you, I don't know if this pharmacy is attached to a GP surgery, you can try and get in that way, or you can just speak to the pharmacists and get them to try and share any experiences that they've had with doctors, and how you can then reflect on that into your personal statement. Okay, so similar questions now. So is being a HCA enough work experience for grad entry medicine? Good question. So as a healthcare assistant, you'll have had lots of exposure to different things. Yes, I would be super surprised if you didn't meet the criteria. So I think a healthcare assistant would be a good candidate for med school. Lots of things that you can demonstrate. So there'll be practical things that you might have done, like taking blood, doing ECGs, versus other things like sitting and talking to people, developing communication and empathy. So I think you'd be a good candidate if you're a HCA, in my opinion. I wanted to go into pediatrics. Where do you think I could do work experience? So if you're looking for niche work experience like that, you'll have to think about things like Birmingham Children's Hospital or the London's Children's, I forgot what it's called now in London. Is it Guy's and St Thomas's Hospital? You'd have to look for a children's hospital. Otherwise, a children's A&E department in your local hospital is your next thing if you want to. But that's not really, you don't have to go for that type of work experience just because you're applying for medicine. That might be something, that's an interest you'll develop later on. Like I've done a six-month post with Dr. Mo in pediatrics. Those kind of special interests you develop much later. What is a firm insurance choice after choosing? Okay, I think that question's gone. When do universities reply to applications? That very much varies. So some of them will do it within a few weeks. They'll all have their own different timelines. It'll probably be determined by how many applicants they get, and then what their interview to ratio is, and they'll work it from there. Will your Gcse grades, English grades, be important for med school? What is the ideal grade to be accepted? Have a look at the med school wizard tool. Remember, it's free to use. It's on the iMedix website. GCSE grades are actually very important, believe it or not. So they look back at certain things. And if you haven't achieved what they want, you might not get your proposed offer. And that's something you need to look at when you look at the wizard tool, because you're better off applying to a med school that will not be as strict. How do you become a healthcare assistant? That's a good question. So I don't think you need anything specific. Perhaps the HCA who asked the original question might want to type the answer to that into the chat box, but I'm pretty sure it's not a specific degree course, but I'm sure I could be corrected on that. Would being a volunteer for Girl Guides count as extracurricular work experience? Would this be good reflection? Yeah, absolutely. Nothing wrong with that at all. Very good to, to do that. Tailor your personal, yeah, you should. So should you tailor your personal statement specifically? It's absolutely, the thing is you only get one personal statement, so you need to keep it generic. If you know that all of your universities, for example, are problem-based learning, then perhaps you can stick something like that in. Otherwise, you just keep it nice and generic. Do you need a medicine to become a neuropsychologist? Very good question. Probably not. It's worth going online to have a look at that. So neurology is a speciality in medicine. Psychologists are not doctors, so they're specialized in the brain. Psychiatrists are doctors who deal with diagnosing, managing mental health problems. So a neuropsychologist, I suspect, actually is a non-medicine, non-medical school related degree. Bmat, is it taken at university, or can it be taken at test centers? I'm pretty sure it's taken at test centers. Have a quick look at the BMA website. And then someone said, I work as a HCA, some hospital volunteer experience got me through the door. Applications made online through NHS jobs. So useful information there from the anonymous attendee. And it always helps if you're in there anyway. So if you are a HCA, you often have access to the wards, you can get friendly with the doctors, and then people can obviously get you on and that's how I got my work experience. So as a physio, I used to do lots of work experience on the wards, and I got to know the junior doctors, and then one of them took me under his wing, and that's how I kind of got my work experience. How hard is doing the Bmat and the UKCAT? They're all as hard as each other. I think the UKCAT's probably a little bit easier, but they're all very difficult in their own right. Can you study neurosciences at undergrad, then medicine for postgrad, and then work in neurosurgery? You can indeed. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. How medical based is a radiologist? Very medical, so they do reporting of scans, but they're also involved in intervention. We had a radiologist at one of our virtual work experience earlier in the year. One of my good friends is a consultant radiologist, and he spoke more about the day-to-day life of a radiologist. But yeah, lots of clinical work now as well. So we've done that. Is it better to avoid what you want to specialize in your personal statement? I think so. you're very early on in your career. It's very hard to know what you want to do at this stage of your career. They're not really looking for someone to say, yeah, I want to be a neurosurgeon, because what you decide now is going to be very different to what you end up doing once you've had all of your different experiences as a med student and a junior doctor. And last question, what is a firm/insurance choice? And after choosing them, will I not be able to accept any of the unis I get offers from? So, once you're a firm, would just be you attending, confirming, yeah, this is the one that I definitely want, and this is the backup in case the first one don't accept me. So there's nothing specific to add to that. It literally is what it says on the tin. So we've answered about 190 questions. We've got a couple of books, which Sami has kindly put in, Ben Akers' Bad Science and Henry Marsh, Do Not Harm, Stories of Life, Death and Brain Surgery. Interesting couple of books to read. I think we will wrap it there. So a bit of a drop off now, 8:15. It's been a useful webinar. Maybe Mo would want to put in the Google review link at this stage as well. And he's put the GMC ethical guidance. Yeah, it's always good practice to have a read of the GMC ethical guidance, different ethical principles that kind of govern what doctors do. And we will probably do a free webinar on that as well in the coming weeks and months. So do look out for that if you're on our emailing list. And obviously, so I think Mo's just about to pop the Facebook, sorry, not the Facebook, the
Google link. Yeah, it takes 20 seconds, guys. If you found it useful today, just click on the link, leave us a review, hopefully a nice one if you've learned something. And of course, we'd really appreciate myself and Dr. Sandhu. A couple of things to mention. If you got your personal statement, they need proofing, do have a look. We've got a lot more of these webinars coming up. So every 6 to 8 weeks, we'll do different themes, interviews, Ucat, Bmat, how to get work experience, for example. So stay on the mailing list if you can. And then a couple of other things. If you've got any friends or colleagues or family who are interested in becoming doctors, please let them know about the iMedics website. We've got the Ucat video course. You can, of course, see that on our website in the link in the chat that we've included. And then don't forget the Ucat free question bank as well, and the Med School Wizard tool, where you can find out which med schools are most suitable for you. The biggest thing you can do for us, I guess, especially for those of you who stayed now to the very end, just let your friends and colleagues know. We don't spend anything on advertising. We basically got in touch with your secondary schools. They forwarded on emails to you, and that's how the word got out. And me and Dr. Sandhu spend a lot of our time doing a lot of free stuff for doctors and students and medical students as well. So it's a Sunday evening, 8:15. We could be at home, or one of us is at home. We could be at home watching television or doing something else, but we're not. We'd like to help you guys get into medicine. So VCAS is everything from me. If you want to add anything, we can wrap up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So thank you very much, Mo. So thank you very much, obviously, guys, for joining. Lots of nice comments coming through. We do appreciate that. Obviously, do recommend us to your friends. Look out for our webinars. Don't forget to follow us on our social media channels, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok as well. You can find us on there. Have a look at the Med School Wizard tool, the video course. Check out the work experience, the personal statement checker, and also the UKCAT online course as well. And obviously, Google review link down there as well if you found it helpful. Key things, so we look forward to obviously seeing you on some of our free up and coming webinars, so do stay on our mailing list. If there's any questions that you have, feel free to get in touch with the team. So the iMedics team is growing. It's a huge team and they're very supportive. They're normally, we're obviously working doctors as well, so we are quite busy, but what we do is, sometimes the messages will get funneled through to us. When we get the right time, we'll get back to you guys on any questions that you have. So all the best with your application. Some of you are very close now. It's a few weeks to go. So all the best. We hope this was helpful in your preparation, and we look forward to supporting some of you guys as you go on to become medical students and hopefully junior doctors in the coming years as well. So it's good night from me and good night from Dr. Mo.